Welcome to Matty Ice Investing, your home for investing education and entertainment. The content of this channel is for education and entertainment purposes only. It should not be considered as financial advice in any way. Your financial situation is as unique as you, so please always consult with a licensed financial advisor before making any investment decisions. I'm not a licensed financial advisor, and this is not advice. My goal is simply to share knowledge and opinions that may help you think about how to put your money to work responsibly. All right, today I wanted to talk a little bit about how I would start investing in 2026. We got the end of the year coming up here, and I thought this might be a good time to just sort of go through what I would do if I was starting in 2026. So, the first thing I would do is I would start with three simple steps. I want to kind of keep this simple. All right, so the first step is that we want to set a goal. I'm a big believer that if you want to get somewhere, you need to set a goal. Otherwise, you got very little chance of being successful. So the first thing we want to do in that case is we want to identify what's our risk profile. There's lots of tools out there to use, but what you really want to understand is how much risk are you willing to take? Because every investment has risk associated with it, and every investment is not going to be guaranteed returns, no matter what anybody on the internet tells you. And so, what you want to do is think about how much risk you're willing to take on for potential gains, because that's going to determine what you're going to invest in. The second thing you want to think about is why are you saving? You want to realize that because that's an important part of your goal. Maybe you're saving up for a big purchase like a home or a car. Maybe you're saving up for retirement. Maybe you're saving up to buy some freedom because you're going to earn some dividends and not have to work as much. But whatever the case is, you really want to think about why you're saving that money and what that goal is. And then the last part of the goal is really to determine your time frame and to think about, is this something you're saving for the next 5 years, the next 5 months? What does that kind of look like for yourself there? It could be indefinitely. You plan to hold these investments forever, but you really want to understand what that looks like. So now let's take a quick look at a sample goal. So this is the example goal I've put together. So it's pretty simple. It doesn't have to be super complicated, obviously. But what I want to do in this case is I want to build a portfolio with sort of mid to low risk profiles. So I don't want to take on a ton of risk. I want to make sure my capital and the investment money I've put in there is pretty safe. I then want to make sure that I've got that generating some consistent returns. So some dividend payback is going to be important to me there. Not looking for strict growth, so I do want to have some returns coming in that way. I do want to use some ETFs or exchange traded funds. I think that's an important piece when you're looking at sort of that mid to low risk profile there. And then, I also want to make sure I'm able to capitalize on some growth with some long-term capital appreciation. So I'm looking at some growth stocks to add to this portfolio as well with me getting started. So the second step is really to think about what account do you want to use. And really, there's two types of accounts that are out there. There's lots of groups underneath these two major account types. The first one is looking at a registered account. So for registered accounts, you've got lots of choices. You've got your RRSPs, your TFSAs, et cetera. Lots of different ways you can do that. Personally, I'd recommend starting with one of these. I think this is the best way to get started because there's lots of tax savings opportunities there. So again, none of them come without risk, and you should certainly contact your financial advisor for figuring out which one's the best one for you. But I think there's lots of good options here depending on where you're at in your stage of life and what your goal is. Alternatively, you could look at a non-registered account. I've got lots of friends and family that have started non-registered accounts. I think that's a bit of a mistake. I think it's better to start with the registered ones, get those tax benefits for yourselves, and take advantage of the opportunities that are there for you. So good way to keep the money in your pockets. So when we're looking at accounts, these are the breakdown of all the different accounts that are out there, some of their purposes behind them, tax treatments, and typical use. I'm not going to go through all of this, but I do want to highlight three main accounts here, which I think are probably the most important ones to look at initially. So the first one there is your RRSP. That's your registered retirement savings plan. This is really for long-term retirement planning. So you're going to be putting your money in there and then pulling it out, hopefully at a lower tax rate when you retire. So you also get a tax savings component to it on your taxes when you file each year. But it's a good opportunity there to put money forward thinking. So if you're thinking longer term, that's probably a good opportunity for you. The next account is your TFSA. Personally, this is my favorite account. I think it's highly underutilized by a lot of folks, but I think it's probably one of the most beneficial accounts that we have for putting money in there. So you put your contributions in, they've been taxed already, but all gains in the account are then tax free. So it's great for short to long term. You could use it to save money up for vacations, cars, investments. You could also use it to create a bit of a third paycheck sort of opportunity for you. And we'll talk about that in a future video. But for me personally, the tax-free savings account is by far, I think, my favorite account there. It does have some limits on how much you can contribute to it. Each year, there's an amount provided, and so you have to figure that out a little bit, but we'll cover that off in a future video. And then the last one is really looking at that non-registered account. So again, no real tax benefits on this, unfortunately, but certainly opportunities and lots of flexibility. And once you've kind of maxed out some of your tax advantaged accounts, I think this is probably the next best opportunity to look at there to keep investing. All right, so you've made it through the first two steps. Now we're on to step three. And this is really to think about how you want to pick your holdings. And so for me, this is one of the more, I'd say, fun and entertaining parts for it. This is what I kind of enjoy doing. And so I'm going to walk you through a sample portfolio here in just a second. So this is our goal, as we talked about. We want to have that sort of mid to low risk. We want to look at some ETFs, and we're going to use the tax-free savings account because that's personally one of my favorites there. And we're going to start to add some holdings to it. So for me personally, I think if I was just starting off, I'd probably look at something like a VFV. This is an account or an ETF, excuse me. It's owned by Vanguard. It works to replicate the S&P 500. Be looking to put a large portion there. I think that's a good starting point there. It also helps sort of build out that initial base component to it. And so this will help track the S&P 500 for you and really kind of get you started. Then I'd probably look to add something like a VDY. This is another Vanguard product. I think they've got some really good stuff there, which is why I tend to like using some of their accounts. And they've got this at their high dividend yield. So you start to get some reoccurring payments coming in here. If I'm not mistaken, I believe VDY pays on a monthly basis. So that's another great benefit to it. So you'd have some capital coming back in that you could either reinvest or utilize for any expenses or things that you want to do there. And then to kind of round out my ETFs, I'm a big fan of the ZNQ from BMO. I think this is a really good one. It helps sort of look at that NASDAQ 100. So you get a lot of the tech companies in there. Get you a lot of exposure to those areas. And what you can see here is we've really kind of locked in here and put about 80% into these ETFs. I think this is helping reduce the risk. I think this holds about 600 some odd companies across all these accounts here. So you've really got some really good exposure and some really good diversification just right out of the gate. And so with that in place, I then look at some targeted investment opportunities. And so one of the ones I really like would be like an Amazon. I think Amazon is probably one of the best companies you can own out there right now. So huge fan of them and what they're doing. So I'd probably look to add about 10% to that. And then to round out the account, another great holding would be Alphabet, which is the parent company of Google. I think they're another great powerhouse company. So if I was sort of an average investor getting started in 2026, this is probably a pretty good account to get started with there. And I'd feel very comfortable that my money's going to be well protected, see some good, strong growth over the years. And then I can look to add or trim and change the position as time goes on, but a good starting piece there. But personally, if I myself, Matty Ice, was thinking about investing, I do things just a little bit different. Some of that's just based on my profile and what I would like to do. So for myself, if I was starting in 2026, I think what I would be looking at is changing up the goal just a little bit. So for me, I'd be looking to sort of that more mid to high risk profile. I'd feel comfortable being in that position there. I'd be prioritizing some of the assets that can generate some reoccurring revenues. For anybody who knows me in the real world, that's one of my big fans is I like having that regular dividend money or contributions coming back in on a regular basis. I use that to then purchase when prices are down, and I use that to just have some funds that are constantly in there without having to sell any of my positions. But I also want to maintain some strong allocation to tech. I'm a big fan of tech. I think a lot of folks are. I want to make sure I've got that contribution that I can use if and when needed there. And so again, I'm going to use my TFSA account because I think there's a lot of benefits to that. I'll speak to some of the minor challenges as we go through the portfolio here. So again, for me personally, I'd start with a company or a holding called DFN. This is the Dividend 15 split corp. Really like their holdings. For anyone who's not familiar with split corps, let me know in the comments if you want me to do a video on what that means. But they pay a much higher yield, a little bit of a different setup than some of the traditional ETFs. But really enjoy the holding there and the contributions I can use there to sort of reinvest. I'd probably then look to start adding some of my stable companies that I really enjoy holding. Starting off with Manulife. I think Manulife is a great company out there. Lots of great returns on it. It provides a steady dividend contribution in there, as well as some good growth opportunities as well. Round that out with Royal Bank. I think Royal is definitely the best of the big Canadian banks here up north, and I think that's a great opportunity to own some of that. So round that out with another 15%. And then of my big three Canadian companies I really enjoy, Power Corp would be the other one on there. I think it's another great holding. And the beauty with these four holdings is this makes up about 75% of my portfolio, and it has nice, steady, almost regular monthly payments that would be coming in. So you could use those as sort of that third paycheck approach that I'll put in a future video here, but also as an opportunity to just make sure you've got some stability and some good growth and some balance across some different sectors there. So again, I think that's a great way to get started. And then to look at my growth opportunities, similar to the sample portfolio I did before, I'm going to be looking at tech. So for me personally, I'm going to round it out and diversify a little bit further. So I'm going to look at having a 5% holding in NVIDIA. I think NVIDIA is a great company that's been doing some amazing things over the last few years. And while there's some opportunity where it may slow down just a little bit, I still think it's going to be a very strong holding as we go forward over the next few years. And it's 5% to feel very comfortable holding that position in the portfolio. I'd then like to add a company like Meta. I think Meta is making some great moves. Every so often, they do trip themselves up with things like the metaverse and some other areas where they get a bit over their skis and a bit overspending. But I do think there's opportunity there, and I think there's a lot of growth potential in what Meta is doing. I like what they're doing with the glasses and with the VR goggles, and I think as that moves forward, that'll be a very powerful revenue stream for them as they go. And they've got a great base in all the software and all the work that they're doing there from an advertising standpoint. Right along them is Amazon. Again, probably one of my favorite companies to hold right now. I'd say there's very little weakness on the Amazon side. They've had some struggles this year in 2025, but I think lots of opportunity for them to grow as they go forward there. So another strong piece to add to the pie. Another strong one would be Google. I think Google is another very great holding to have. As I've mentioned, I think when you look at what they've got with their advertising and with YouTube and all the work that they're doing there, and then with their AI and some of their long bets with Waymo and such, I think they're going to have a lot of future growth opportunities. So really like holding Google. Glad to see that they've kind of turned it around here in 25 and been a happy holder of theirs for a long time now. And then last but not least, I'd probably add Microsoft. I think, when I look at five great tech companies to hold, I think this rounds out the group. I think you got a lot of diversification in there, but also a lot of great growth potential. And I think all five of these are very strong holdings. So for me, this is the way I would try and build a portfolio if I was starting fresh today. Based on everything I know now, I think this would really meet my needs personally. So again, remember, if you're starting in 26, the real important thing is to set a goal. You want to then select your account, and then you want to pick your holdings. So know where you want to go, pick the right tools to help you get there. And again, contact a financial advisor. They can be a great support there in helping you get started if you're not sure what to do. Thanks for listening, everybody. I hope you found some value in this, and look forward to talking to you in the next. Bye.